On Mother's Day, the 10th of May, 2020, a woman named Suzanne Morphew went out for a bicycle ride in the mountains of Chaffee County, Colorado, and then never came back. She was 49 years old, a mother of two, a school teacher from Indiana who had moved to the high country of Colorado. Her bicycle was found down a ravine. Her helmet was found a mile away. Neither looked like a crash. There was no trace of her for more than 3 years. And when the case built around her disappearance finally reached the edge of a trial, it collapsed, not on the evidence, on the conduct of Her husband was charged with her murder in 2021. He pleaded not guilty. The charges were dropped in 2022, weeks before her remains were found by accident in 2023, 50 miles from where she vanished. And in 2025, he was charged again, a second grand jury, a second arrest 5 years after she was gone. Her name was Suzanne Morphew. Her husband, Barry Morphew, is charged, not convicted. He has pleaded not guilty. He is presumed innocent. This is not first a story about him. It is a story about her and about a system that tried to answer for what happened to her and nearly failed itself in the attempt. A murder prosecution that came apart on its own misconduct. A district attorney disbarred. A defendant charged, freed and charged again. And the family split down the middle over what to believe and even over where to lay her to rest. It has not, as of this telling, reached a verdict. The trial is still ahead. This channel is called the Quiet Hill. This is the Mother's Day case. Chapter 1, Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Renee Morman was born on the 30th of April 1971 in Indiana, the fourth child of Jean and Adriana. Her father owned a small local institution, a root beer and hot dog stand in Anderson, Vienna, still run by the family today. Her parents divorced when she was 9. The blended family that grew around her, step-siblings on both sides, was large, and for most of her life close. Her older sister Melinda had been born exactly 15 years before her, on the same April day. Suzanne, Melinda later said, was her gift on her 15th birthday. Suzanne graduated from Alexandria Monroe High School in 1989, then went to Purdue University and earned a degree in elementary education in 1994. She and Barry Morphew had grown up in the same hometown of Alexandria, Indiana, and had met in high school. She married him on the 5th of August, 1994 at 23. They had 2 daughters, Mallory, born on the 4th of July, 1999, and Maisie, born on the 28th of August. Suzanne taught school before leaving the classroom to raise the girls. Barry built a landscaping business. The shadow over the last chapter of her life was her health. She had been diagnosed with lymphoma. The early press reported the form inconsistently. Some outlets said Hodgkin's, the official autopsy record. The authoritative document described recurrent follicular lymphoma. A non-Hodgkin form, the cancer had returned, She was on maintenance chemotherapy following a complete remission. In 2018, the family moved from Indiana to Maysville, Colorado, a tiny community west of Salida in Chaffee County, in the Arkansas River Valley beneath the Salwatch Range. A fresh start and closer to their older daughter. Around the time of the move, the cancer recurred. By every account of the people who knew her, Suzanne was a devoted mother. In the middle of a hard fight, living in one of the most beautiful areas in Colorado, she was 49. Chapter 2, Mothers, the last confirmed trace of Suzanne Morphew's ordinary life is a coffee cup. She was a regular morning coffee drinker. DNA testing later confirmed that a half-finished cup left on the kitchen counter on the morning of the 10th of May carried her DNA, and hers alone. That morning was Mother's Day. According to the account Barry Morphew gave investigators, he had left the house at around 5 in the morning to drive roughly 150 miles north for a landscaping job in Broomfield. Suzanne, the account goes, later went out for a bicycle ride near their home and did not return. The alarm was raised not by Barry, but by a neighbor who reported her missing to the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office on the afternoon of the 10th of May. The physical evidence surfaced in pieces over the following days. Her bicycle was found down a steep ravine off a county road near Highway 50, not far from the house. 4 days later, her bike helmet was found less than a mile off. The condition of the bicycle and the helmet became one of the quiet anchors of the investigation. No crash, no blood. A scene that did not look like an accident. The Chaffee County Sheriff's Office launched a search on the 11th of May, the day after she was reported missing. It grew quickly into a major multi-agency effort, drawing in the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the CBI. Search crews combed the terrain around the Morphew home. On the 15th of May, items belonging to Suzanne were recovered. On the 17th of May, Barry released a video appeal to the public, addressing his wife directly and asking anyone with information to come forward. On the 19th of May, authorities searched the search for Suzanne herself, for a living woman, and then, as the weeks passed, for a body would go on without result for more than 3 years. Chapter 3, the investigation. The investigation that unfolded across 2020 and into 2021 focused from early on Barry for a year produced charges against no one and critically nobody. The Chaffee County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, and the CBI worked the case together. Private reward fund, widely reported at around $200,000, was raised for information leading to Suzanne's recovery. 2 threads of the investigation would later become central. The first was a rare chemical. Investigators came to believe Suzanne had been incapacitated with a wildlife tranquilizer, a compounded veterinary immobilization drug known as BAM. BAM, butorphanol, azaperone, and midatomidine, a cocktail used to sedate large game and wildlife. Investigators recovered a dart gun, empty darts, and a needle for injecting tranquilizer into darts from Barry Morphew's gun safe. Barry acknowledged using tranquilizer darts. He said he used them to sedate deer, to remove their antlers without killing the animals, and that he had run an ad. At the 2021 preliminary hearing, however, authorities conceded under cross-examination that they had the theory had a mechanism and a plausible source, but at that stage a gap. The second thread was that no one could find Suzanne. For over 3 years, the terrain of the Colorado High Country swallowed the case's central fact. A murder theory was assembling around a body had not been recovered. Prosecuting a homicide without a body is legally possible, but structurally fragile. It rests on circumstantial chains rather than forensic certainty. The investigators believed they knew what had happened. They did not yet have the thing that would let them prove it. Chapter 4, the affidavit on the 5th of May 2021, almost exactly a year after Suzanne vanished, Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and related counts. The document that justified the arrest was an affidavit of roughly 130 pages, unsealed months later, when it laid out in dense detail the prosecution's circumstantial theory. Everything that follows is as alleged in that affidavit. None of it has been proven at trial. The affidavit alleged that Suzanne had been in a multi-year extramarital affair with a man named Jeff Libler and had been messaging him about leaving Barry. Investigators theorized that on the afternoon of the 9th of May, the day before she was reported missing, Barry returned home while Suzanne was messaging Libler and used to incapacitate her. That Barry could not control Suzanne's insistence on leaving him and resorted to something the affidavit said he had done his entire life, hunt and control her, as he had hunted and controlled. After a 3-day preliminary hearing, Chaffee County judge ruled there was probable cause for Barry Morphew to stand trial. On that finding, the case moved toward trial, never got there. Chapter 5, the collapse. This is the hinge of the entire case, and it turns not on the facts of Suzanne's death, but on the conduct of the people prosecuting it. The trial was moved from Chaffee County to Fremont County in January of 2022. The originally assigned judge recused himself over a potential conflict. Judge Ramsey Lama of the 11th Judicial District was appointed to preside. What he inherited was a prosecution that had, according to his later findings, repeatedly failed its most basic obligation, turning over evidence to the defense. The prosecution was led by the 11th Judicial District Attorney Linda Stanley. Under Colorado's Rule 16, the prosecution must discovery to the defense ahead of trial. Judge Lama found that Stanley's office had engaged in what he called the continuing pattern of failing to comply with those obligations, and a subsequent order. In the order that would break the case, Lama wrote that the prosecution's actions amounted to negligent and arguably reckless disregard of the rule. On the eve of trial, Lama imposed a sanction whose severity legal observers called rare. He excluded 12. He called the exclusion significant, but warranted given the prosecution's record of non-compliance, as one legal analyst put it. It is relatively rare for a judge to exclude witnesses at all. The exclusion gutted the state's case. The barred witnesses would have presented the cell phone data, truck telematics, and GPS location evidence at the heart. Prosecutors themselves wrote that barring the witnesses damaged the state in a profound way and amounted to sanctions that amount to dismissal, with the defendant receiving a complete windfall rather than proceed to trial with a hollowed out case and critically still without Suzanne's body. The prosecution moved to dismiss. On the 19th of April 2022, minutes before a pre-trial conference and days before trial, District Attorney Stanley filed a motion to drop all charges. She wrote that the state needed to investigate further and believed it was close to discovering the victim's body. The defense argued the case should be dismissed with prejudice permanently, so it could never be refiled precisely because of the prosecution's conduct. The court instead granted dismissal without prejudice, leaving the door open for the state to refile if it developed new evidence. Barry Morphew walked out of the Fremont County Courthouse a free man, flanked by his daughters. Judge Ramsey Lama resigned from the bench in April of 2022, citing personal reasons. The dismissal was not a ruling that Barry Morphew was a ruling that the state had so mishandled the prosecution that the case could not go. Barry's own original lawyer, Iris Aiton, founded an organization called Protect Ethical Prosecutors, and in the fall of 2023 filed a complaint against Linda Stanley with the state's Attorney Regulation Council. In September of 2024, a 3-member disciplinary panel found Stanley had committed multiple ethical violations and, splitting 2-1 on the sanction, ordered her. The order found 3 categories of misconduct. She had made improper public statements about the case, including to true crime creators. She had failed to supervise it. And she had opened a retaliatory investigation into Judge Lama himself. She was officially disbarred on the 1st of November 2024. Stanley appealed. On the 8th of September 2025, the Colorado Supreme Court, voting 4-2, upheld her disbarment. It reversed a single finding but affirmed the rest, and affirmed the sanction. The court's language was withering. It described Stanley as a ship's captain who never appeared on the bridge, whose absence at the helm led to a series of events that ended with the first-degree murder case running aground. Chapter 6, The Remains. For 3.5 years, the case had no body. Then on the 22nd of September 2023, it found one by accident. agents of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, searching an area near Moffat in Saguache County for an entirely unrelated investigation, came upon human remains. The location was roughly 50 miles south of the Salida area where Suzanne had been reported. On the 27th of September 2023, the coroner's office confirmed, using dental records, that the remains were those of Suzanne Morphew. The autopsy report, released roughly 7 months later, changed the evidentiary landscape. The coroner ruled the manner of death a homicide, specifically homicide by unspecified means, in the setting of butorphanol-azaperone and medetomidine intoxication. All three components of the wildlife immobilization cocktail were present. According to the later indictment, all three chemicals were detected in Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow. The coroner examined her femur. The coroner found no indication of trauma to the remains and noted the clinical history of her follicular lymphoma treatment. In 2021, the state had a mechanism, a tranquilizer dart, and a plausible source, Barry's darts, but no chemical body. In 2023, the body was found, and the specific unusual chemical cocktail that had haunted the investigation from the beginning was, according to the state, what had been a gap in the affidavit was now, in the prosecution's account, its strongest single piece of forensic evidence. Chapter 7, the re-indictment. The case was then rebuilt deliberately in a different judicial district and around a new forensic center of gravity. On the 18th of June 25, a grand jury in Colorado's 12th Judicial District returned an indictment charging Barry Morphew with the first-degree murder of Suzanne Morphew. He was taken into custody in Arizona on the 20th of June 2025, the second time he had been arrested and charged in his wife's death. The new venue was significant. The first prosecution had run through the 11th Judicial District under the now disbarred Linda Stanley. The refiled case is being handled by 12th Judicial District Attorney Ann Kelly in Alamosa County, in the San Luis Valley of southern Colorado. The change moved the case away from the office and the personnel whose conduct had destroyed the first attempt. The rebuilt case leans heavily on the DNA evidence and the prescription trail. According to the indictment, prescription records show that between 2017 and 2020, only 2 entities in southwestern Colorado received BAME, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and the National Park Service. Barry Morphew, the indictment states, had obtained and filled several BAME prescriptions in 2018 in connection with a deer breeding business he ran using the drug, he said, to remove antlers or animals. The indictment's core assertion is stark that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry. Barry Morphew acknowledged using BAM roughly a month before Suzanne vanished to sedate a deer in the family home's breezeway. He has insisted he never used it on his wife. This is the prosecution's theory laid out in an indictment It has not been tested at the trial. Barry Morphew has pleaded not guilty and is presumed innocent. What the first attempt had lacked, the second was built to supply a body chemical prescription trail, and the district untouched by the first prosecution's collapse. Chapter 8, the proceedings as of this telling, the refiled case is at the pre-trial stage. In September of 2025, a judge set bond conditions. Barry Morphew posted a bond reported at roughly $3 million. He is living in Maysville near Salida under strict conditions, a GPS and co-monitor. The surrender of his passport, the presiding judge notably declined to viral contact with the case's victims, observing that they are his daughters. The defense strategy is public and pointed. Barry Morphew's attorneys have signaled they will attack the BAM forensic evidence as junk science. One of Barry's attorneys has stated flatly that the claim Suzanne Morphew had BAM in her system is not true, calling the science incomplete. The central technical argument is that only one of 3 consulted labs found the 3 BAM substances in Suzanne's femur, and that the confirming lab is, in the defense's characterization, certified only for driving under the influence testing. The defense framed the methodological concern this way. When you tell a scientist you think something happened and ask them to prove it, you are asking them to confirm an assumption. Chapter 9, The Family. Suzanne Morphew's family is publicly and painfully divided, and the division falls along a clear line. Her daughters believe in Barry's innocence. Her siblings believe he is responsible. What follows presents both positions and adjudicates neither. On one side stand Suzanne's daughters, Mallory and Macy Morphew. They have stood by their father since the first arrest in 2021, helped fund his release on bond in 2025, and frequently accompany him to court. After the 2025 re-indictment, they were described as shocked and devastated. In February of 2026, they filed a motion demanding the state release their mother's remains so they could hold a memorial. That motion collided directly with the prosecution's seizure of the remains as evidence. On the other side stand Suzanne's siblings. Her sister Melinda Morman Bowser has expressed confidence in the new prosecution, saying she has great confidence in Ann Kelly. Her brother David Morman, in a victim impact statement filed in August of 2025, asked the court not to release Barry and called for a life sentence with no chance of parole. Her siblings David, Andrew, and Melinda strongly object to releasing Suzanne's remains to the daughters, citing concern for the integrity of the evidence and a wish to bring Suzanne home to Indiana. Gene Morman, Suzanne's father, died on the 11th of November 2020, 6 months after his daughter vanished. He never knew what had become of her. On his tombstone is a photograph of the two together. The split is not a mystery to be solved. It is a fact of the case and a measure of its cost. The people who were her children and the people who were her brothers and sisters got the same man and see different things. Coda, the procedural question, strip the case to its structure, and it becomes a study in institutional failure and institutional recovery running in sequence. The first prosecution did not fail because the evidence was weak in some abstract sense. It failed because the institution failed. A district attorney made public comments about a pending case. Her office did not turn over discovery. When the judge ruled against her, she opened a retaliatory investigation into him. She was disbarred from. And yet the case did not end there. The dismissal was without prejudice. The body was found. So the same defendant who had been charged and freed by the state's own misconduct was charged again 5 years after the events with a family split in two and a public that had watched the hard journey. A dismissal without prejudice is the law's attempt to hold two things at once: that a defendant should not suffer permanently for the state's misconduct, whether that self-correction delivers justice or merely churns a family and a defendant through 5 years of proceedings before a verdict, is the thing the trial begins to answer. Suzanne Morphew went out on a bicycle on Mother's Day and did not come home. She was a school teacher from Indiana, a mother of two. Her death set in motion a 5-year test of whether justice, once wrought, can be picked up again. The people who loved her are still persistent that let her case fall the first time. This channel is called The Quiet Hill. We come back to the cases the institutions could not close and the questions they leave behind. Subscribe and the next one will find you. Till then, keep her in mind. Suzanne Morphew, mother of two.